Kill it and grill it. Let's talk about beaver tail, specifically giant beaver tail. Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. In original Dungeons & Dragons, Supplement 2 is titled Blackmoor. And on page 16, at the bottom of the page, we have the introduction to giant beavers. And interesting comments about them. They're not inclined to fight. They build great dams, and they are remarkably intelligent and can be persuaded to build dams and other earthwork in exchange for jewelry, gold, or gourmet bark. So it talks about giant beavers. They were in original Dungeons & Dragons. Then later on in first edition, they actually show up in the monster manual, giant beavers. Very similar description about them, that they're very intelligent and so on. So you had these creatures which go back to the original Dungeons and Dragons. They were intelligent creatures that could actually build earthworks and dams for people. Second edition, they mention beavers. Beavers are included in second edition, but not giant beavers. So that's there. And in first edition, it was one of the monsters without a picture, which is sort of strange. Not sure why. So now comes some interesting things. I have a copy. My mother cut this out and noted on it and sent it to me, and it's one of the things that I treasure because it's just shows my mother's sense of humor. On April 15th of 1991, a few years ago, shall we say, the Salt Lake Tribune printed an article on page A10 that listed several recipes. One of the recipes is beaver tail. I'll be talking about some of the other recipes in other videos, but it's and how they apply to Dungeons & Dragons. The articles say the recipes come from Eating Up the Santa Fe Trail, which is an actual book, and it's available on Amazon, and I'll put a link in the description below. And it basically says, you boil the tail gently for an hour, and after the tail cools, you remove the thin black pebbled skin with a knife or dagger, and then you cut the skin around the perimeter, then peel away the skin, cut up the tail, bread, and bake. So that's baked beaver tail. Now, I actually found another interesting article, which I'll show, about fried beaver tail. So I found this recipe for fried beaver tail, which would definitely apply to giant beaver tail. So if we're listing this in a little bit different order, because you look at the second, one of the bottom lines here, it's about how to skin it. So sticking a barbecue fork into the meat end of the beaver tail, then toast it like a marshmallow over a wood stove or electric burner or other heat source. As it toasts, the hide puffs away from the meat like a slowly expanding balloon. After a few minutes, you can strip it away, then trim the edges, leaving you with a nice fillet of greasy pink-white meat for your recipe. Okay. So, yes, you create this balloon, you roast it there. So, let's take a look at this recipe for fried beaver tail. So you skin the beaver tail, clean it thoroughly, and wash with a solution of salt water. Let soak overnight in cold water to cover, adding half a cup of vinegar and a tablespoon of salt to the water. The next day, remove from the brine, wash, then cover in a solution of 2 tablespoons of soda and to 2 quarts of water. Now, if we're talking about a giant beaver tail, let's assume it's 3 to 4 times that large. So we probably want to end up going with probably 2 cups of water and 4 tablespoons of salt in a huge pot to handle the beaver tail. And he says, so then we need to scale up the solution. We bring it to a boil and reduce and simmer for 10 minutes. Well, with the giant beaver tail, we'll probably need to go at least 15, maybe 20. Dredge the beaver tails in seasoned flour. Melt butter in a heavy fry pan and saute the tails in low heat until tender. Mix the wine, mustard, sugar, garlic powder, and Worcestershire sauce, and then add the beaver tails and gently simmer for 10 minutes, basting frequently. And then there's the description that he has about its taste. It says, born and raised, it says, every winter fried beaver tail was a culinary treat that would grace our table on a weekly basis. So what happens is that he says the smell is not charming, but it's not as bad as some things, and the taste and saved work is worth it. Okay, that's talking about roasting the beaver tail, but doesn't talk too much about the fried beaver tail as a culinary treat. So it's an interesting description about eating beaver tail. So this is an old-time monster from original Dungeons and Dragons and from first edition. Second edition only included standard sized beaver, but you could actually cook their tails using these recipes. And so I'd like to hear your comments. Would you try fried beaver tail? Or what would would your characters in your adventures go out and either kill some beavers and have their tails for dinner, or go after the giant beavers if you want to introduce them from original Dungeons and Dragons and from first edition? So give me your comments below. Thank you for listening to my video. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.